it's been a hot minute since the draft, so I've had a good chance to narrow down, my top 10, which is what we'll be diving into today. But I'm just ready to hop into it, man. I'm thankful that my internet is, knock on wood for now, okay. But yeah, man, I'm ready for it. My number 10 IDP rookie is Joseph Osai, now a Cincinnati Bengal. He's playing the outside linebacker, kind of an edge hybrid in a way. He'll be playing a role where he's, set off to the side. He's not going to rush passer every play. He'll be dropping back from time to time. But reason I got him there, he's going to be an immediate starter, which is huge for IDP players, especially in their rookie year. He's going to have a ton of opportunity. They lost Shaq Lawson in free agency. And their defense, they've continued to add more and more elements to over the last 2 seasons. So I think he had third-round draft capital, which isn't great, especially if you want an IDP to produce early in their career. But for the most part, he's going to have immediate opportunity on a defensive line that needs help. He has decent pass rushers around him. That's going to make it so they can't solely focus on this guy. But seeing that he's, also going to be playing linebacker, playing off ball, and, pitching into run support as well as pass rushing, that, kind of ups his floor and makes him valuable, even though he's an edge player. I comped him to Harold Landry. If you're familiar, similar play style where, rushes the passer, does very well in run support. But really, his bread and butter is playmaking, forced fumbles, recovering fumbles, stuff like that. Sacks, not a ton. He had a decent amount of college production in that. But all in all, I like Joseph Osai. Like I said, he's my number 10 IDP rookie. And those are the reasons why, essentially. The drawbacks, like I said, that defense isn't very good, which isn't always a bad thing. Because you're going to be on the field more likely you're going to have a little bit more opportunity. But again, they don't have great corners, so they can't force the quarterback to hold the ball longer. So he's not going to have a lot of time to get to the passer. My big knock on him in college was how he would set up for either a run support play or a pass rush play, where he would just set up on the line of scrimmage and just sit there like in what a tight end would sit in a block stance, basically. And I think what this was, and this is just pure conjecture, I haven't read into this or I haven't been able to find anything concrete, but I think what the deal was he would basically be in the stance to try to get into a block shed sooner. And what was great is when it was a run play, awesome, he was able to block shed right away. But what happened was when it ended up being a pass rush play, he was almost immediately taken out of the play and a non-factor. Especially if that play went to the other side. He wasn't able to get around because he was set up to kind of set a stance, pick a hole, and block shed that way. But all in all, Joseph Osai, I like him a lot. Did you have any questions about Joseph Osai? Did you know he existed? Is my first question.
No.
All right. Well, you're learning. That's what the point is.
Honestly, my IDP prep for my IDP leagues is, hey, Bob, I got this trade offer. What do you think? And then Bob goes, well, is this guy available? And I'm like, yeah, get that guy instead. And it's like, perfect. Thanks, bud. So, Bob, let's do number 9.
Yeah, my big conspiracy theory is that Mike really brought me onto the team just so he could have a direct source for IDP knowledge, just because he saw I was doing well in my leagues or writing well, whatever the case was. But moving on, hey, it worked out for you. Moving on to my number 9 IDP. Nick Bolton, newly a Kansas City Chief. Nick Bolton is an interesting case for me.
I've heard of this guy.
Okay. I'm not a huge fan of him personally as a prospect, at least, and going to where he got drafted, knocked him down my board. He was probably my 5th or 6th IDP heading into the draft, but where he got drafted actually was a negative for me. Reason being is I do think he has developing to do yet. Especially when it comes to like his play recognition and stuff like that. But most rookies do, and that's fine. But the thing about it is, a lot of IDP players will remember Willie Gay was a huge hype piece for a lot of the season last year on Kansas City. Drafted similar draft capital. They were both drafted in the second round. Nick Bolton was a tick earlier than Willie Gay, so you can't really argue that, one was superiorly drafted over the other. But when you look at the situation, what they did last year with Willie Gay was they basically said, no, you need to learn the defense. You can't play. Basically, unless they needed to put him in, he was getting minimal plays per game. And kind of specialized in run stopping situations, or where it was more likely going to be a run play. So that's a concern. It's still the same defense. Still, Steve Spagnuolo is still the defensive coordinator. So it's not. I don't think that kind of theory is going to change unless they think maybe he's more game ready than Willie Gay is, which is possible. The thing with Nick Bolton is that he's a very fast player, and so he can kind of make up for his heady mistakes, whereas Willie Gay is not as fast of a player. He's quick, but he's not. His long speed isn't there, and he's a lot more of a kind of a bruising linebacker, whereas Nick Bolton's more, he's like 232. And like, 5'10", so he's a smaller, kind of more compact guy. But so I don't mind Nick Bolton, but all those are, concerns for me, especially being a linebacker. You as a linebacker, you want more steady production, as opposed to, kind of spottiness, which is what I think, if he even plays, I think is going to be kind of the case with him. But yeah, so my professional account for him right away was Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith is a great linebacker on the Cowboys. I'm sure you're familiar, being an Eagles fan. And
What's
just
that supposed to mean?
just because it's division, you're I don't know, you're throwing running backs into the guy. I don't know.
I gotcha.
But yeah, so I don't have a lot against Nick Bolton. I think the situation is more of a turnoff for me than anything. If he would have, say, hypothetically went to the Eagles, where that linebacker room is kind of open right now. I think Singleton is going to be the guy for this year. I think Wilson is a nice pitch-in player. But thanks, Jorge.
Well, for those of you who are not watching and are listening, Jorge from Fantasy and Frames says Bolton graded out in most defensive categories as the best tackling linebacker in all of college football. And then below that, he also said that we are his favorite podcast. So thank you, Jorge.
See, and I never had an issue with his tackling. What I noticed a lot on film was that either when he was in a tackling situation, he would make the tackle and usually do it, well, and wrap people up. What my concern is something I'm kind of looking into as like another analytic or an in-depth analytic, is like missing tackle opportunities. And the thing with that is like getting caught in traffic, taking a bad angle and not even getting to the player to be able to make a tackle. Stuff like that is, more concerning for me than, like his tackling was good. So I don't have too much issue with that personally. But again, it was just more and people love him in coverage. And I didn't think, and looking at film, I don't do a ton of diving into analytics. The only analytic I've done is looking at their points per game scoring and IDP 1-2-3 scoring. But other than that, in terms of their college production, I don't look into that as much. I more trust the film and what I see. But again, I don't hate Bolton. He's in my top 10. So I can't say I hate him, like I said. Did you have any questions about Nick Bolton at all?
I have a question on who number 8 is.
Okay, number 8 is Trayvon Morig, Morig, now a Las Vegas Raider. I almost said Oakland Raider. I believe he was the second safety drafted. I could be wrong. But second round draft capital. He was a multi-year starter in college. Always a good indicator of, at least having a chance at success in the NFL. My big knock on him as a college player, and this is from film, again, is that he wasn't as willing of a tackler. It seemed like he was always kind of the last guy up to come in to make a tackle and run support. And that could be because he was playing a lot of, center field ball. He was playing, back. He was playing center field safety. He was playing, helping corners and deep coverage, stuff like that. So it could just be that he was just the last guy getting up. You can't fault a guy for that. So, I mean, that was just something that I kind of noticed, but he is more of a ball hawking player, makes a lot of plays in the air, plays on the, pass deflections, whether it's interceptions, stuff like that. He has a nose for the ball, and that's pretty huge. And then going to Las Vegas, where they lost several of their starting safeties from last year. So he's going to have an immediate, starting role locked up more than likely. I believe he'll probably be their free safety. They'll put Jonathan Abram in the box more than likely. And that'll, free safeties. Go ahead.
That's good for all my Jonathan Abram shares then, right?
Yes. I will say I'm worried about Jonathan Abram long term.
Don't. Come on.
I'm worried about him long term solely because of the fact that he can't seem to stay healthy. And the reason why is because he plays very reckless. He throws his body into stepping machines on the sideline, not stepping machines, but they're whatever they get up onto, get a better camera angle, whatever those are. He threw himself into one of those this last year. Right. But so that's a concern. And, when teams draft you highly and you can't seem to stay healthy for whatever reason, it's concerning. People get sick of that and it gets old. But I think Morig can step up in a multitude of ways. Moving on to number 7 is one of the most interesting stories in this draft class on the defensive side of the ball, and that's Kwity Paye out of Michigan, now an Indianapolis Colt, which was one of the best defensive lineman landing spots of the entire draft. Reason being is the immediate starting, he's a first-round draft capital. He's going to be starting day one. The one thing I don't love about him is that he's more of a run defender than a sack guy. And I don't think that's going to change, at least in year one. They don't have a lot of pass rushing threats on that defensive line. DeForest Buckner is the same way. He's more of a run defender than he is a run or a pass rusher. So that's, kind of a concern, but that run defending gives a good floor. So I don't hate it. Like I said, the draft capital is great. Another multi-year college starter. He had lower college production statistically, which, believe it or not, when you produce in college, you usually tend to produce in the NFL. It was lower, but it was decent for defensive linemen that I've pulled stats on and stuff like that. But all in all, like I said, the landing spot alone, pretty awesome landing spot. So I can't fault that. Like I said, he'll have a ton of opportunity going forward. And that brings me right into, unless you had anything else on him, go ahead.
I have a few things that I want to add here. One is when an NFL team makes a draft pick, and I think we all need to be aware of this, and this does not just go for the defensive side of the ball, this goes for the offensive side of the ball. They are doing what is best for them to win football games. They don't care necessarily about numbers or stats, and they really don't give a shit about your fantasy team. So don't get mad on draft day. Don't. The team's just doing what's best for them, right, Bob? I mean,
unless you're the Packers.
Well, do we really want to get into that?
No.
Okay, so I just want to take a minute. Bob, I know we talked about where we were going to slide this in, but I had to divert because I had to do an early ad read through. So you touched on IDP 123 earlier. And if anybody plays IDP on Sleeper, which I highly recommend, they have now adopted IDP 123 as their main scoring system. So make sure you go into your settings and make sure that everything is up to par and see for yourself.
What's good, IDP Army? It's Jordan Rains, and quickly I want to tell you guys today about the big project I've been working on, the Ultimate IDP Index. The Ultimate IDP Index is the #1 resource for IDP fantasy football players, rookies or veteran for 2021. Inside, you're going to find contract information, tiered IDP rankings, detailed player production profiles going back to 2017, suggested trade values, and a whole lot more, including unique write-ups, unique videos that will only be available within the Ultimate IDP Index. But to me, probably the most valuable thing is the fact that the trade value estimation tool is going to be updated weekly, so you'll always be aware of what a player is worth in your Dynasty League at any given moment. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for the IDP Army Patreon today. Patreon.com/the IDP Army. Join the Black Ops tier and join the IDP Army today.
So again, Jordan was the guy that came up with IDP 123, his fantastic scoring system. It kind of simplifies everything. And you know that the trade values are great too, because I know one of those things that we all have a problem with is assessing trade values with IDP players and offensive players. So, but I could tell you sometimes it's probably better to have a linebacker 2 than a wide receiver 4.
Yep, absolutely, 100%.
See, Bob, he knows what's up.
You get it.
Give me number 6.
Number 6, we got Richie Grant, now an Atlanta Falcon. This is one of my favorite landing spots in the draft for at least for defensive backs, solely because another immediate starter. I loved Richie Grant as a prospect. He was the best free safety prospect I felt like. Second round draft capital again, going to be an immediate starter. He was a multi-year starter in college. His division's his conference is a little weaker, but who cares? He still produced at a very high level. He's a ball hawk, a very willing tackler. He's kind of scrawny, but he throws himself at guys like he's Landon Collins or Jamal Adams. He's a very scrawny guy, but he'll throw his head in there to stop a guy. You don't want him in the gap versus like Derrick Henry, but I tell you what, he'll do his damnedest to try to knock him down. But for me, like I said, Richie Grant's awesome. My DB1 overall. So spoiler alert, no more DBs coming down the pipeline for this. I think I suggested to you to draft Richie Grant in one of your drafts, I believe.
You did, and I believe he got picked 2 picks before we had decided I was going to take him. But I did get him in a different league, so
okay, good.
Yeah, but that's
Good.
actually good that and again, just going back to talking about diversifying your fantasy portfolio.
Yep.
We talked about this at the end of the season, and my biggest downfall this year was I relied on too many of the same players to hit, and had that happened, I would have looked like a damn genius, but they didn't.
It never happens like that.
Maybe it's just not their time yet, but I looked like a damn fool. So, Bob, continue, please.
Right on. So that was Richie Grant. Moving on to my top DL prospect, and that's Jalen Phillips, previously a Miami Hurricane, now a Miami Dolphin. I think that's super cool that he gets to stay in the same state, essentially, even the same town, heck. But I think that's pretty cool. But another guy who's an immediate starter, they shipped off Shaq Lawson in the offseason. He was the starting edge player where Phillips is going to fill in. And I think Phillips is being viewed as a huge discount right now. The weird thing about this class was the DL class was there wasn't a standout edge player like there has been in years past. There wasn't a Nick Bosa. There wasn't a Joey Bosa. There wasn't a Myles Garrett, so on and so forth. But the class was so ambiguous and interesting that instead of, one going early, they all slid down the board because they were all valued very similarly.
Bob,
Jalen, go ahead.
Real quick. Jorge wants to know thoughts on Javon Holland, or is he coming up later?
Nope. No, I'm not. I know Jorge is a huge Javon Holland fan. I think he's just outside my top 10. I think he was like top 15, but I just obviously couldn't fit that into this episode. But Javon Holland, real quick, I wasn't huge on him. He's a playmaker, but he's not, I think he's going to be a real inconsistent player. Didn't have a lot of college production, did not do well in my college production scoring and evaluations and stuff like that. So not huge on him going forward, but he should have ample opportunity to play. But whether or not that equates to a lot of value, who knows? We'll see what happens. But moving on with Jalen Phillips, like I said, first round draft capital, immediate starter. The one big knock on him, and I think this is why he's going as a value in a lot of drafts, is because he has an injury history. There was 2 seasons where he managed to play 10 games. The average college season is about 13 games. So between 2 years, he managed to play 10 games between concussions. I think he had knee issues, a lot of concussions. I think that was about 70% of the games missed was concussions. It was so bad that he actually retired from football in early 2019 and basically said, I'm done, this is over, whatever. And there's allegations and stuff like that, or whispers that it was like a forced retirement. Basically, his original college was like, we're done with you, like go away. We're done with this injury history. And he was a high recruit too, so that's
sounds like every woman I ever dated.
But this isn't your soapbox, Mike. But moving moving on. Like I said, I think he's turning into a value because a lot of people are wary of that. And the Dolphins haven't produced, like, even though Emmanuel Ogbah was solid last year, they haven't produced a great, edge player in years, that, really showed out and really showed up well. So I think between the landing spot, even though he's a first round pick, he was the first deal off the board, and he's still not getting a lot of respect in drafts. I'm getting him a lot in like the mid third round a lot of times in my 12 team IDP leagues. And for me, that's solid value for a guy who I think is going to be a top deal in this league in a couple of years. But moving on from him, we have.
I have a
Go
question
ahead.
actually before we get to number 4. How cold is it that you're rocking a flannel? I mean, I know you live in Wisconsin, but
It's a nice like 65, 70 degrees right now.
okay.
I always wear cargo shorts, flannel, and then usually a Johnny Cash shirt or Dynasty Rewind shirt or Fantasy Six Pack shirt. But I'm almost always wearing a flannel. It's just I like layers, even though it's hot out. Like the other week it was like 85, and I'm wearing a flannel to go to the bar, and even my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I like my flannels. Leave me alone." Let a guy live.
So look for Bob Van Duzer at the Canton Fantasy Football Expo rocking a flannel
I can
in Ohio in August.
I can almost promise I'll have a flannel on. I can
You
almost promise it.
psychopath. You know what? So, I mean, you wear flannels in summer.
Yep.
You dive deep into IDP.
Yep.
Bob, are you a psychopath?
I might be. I wear shorts all year round too. So I wear my cargo shorts and flannels all year round.
I love it.
So
No, you know what? I love asking people just about things that make them them. And these
sure.
things interest me. And now it's something else I could pick on Bob about. So,
Yep.
Bob, number 4, if you could, please.
So moving on to what was one of my favorite linebackers heading into the draft, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He was actually my LB2 heading into the draft.
It's JOK, right?
JOK is fine. I won't make you spell the whole thing. It's actually not hard. It's spelled literally exactly how it's pronounced. But
went to Cleveland, did he not?
yes, correct. Cleveland in the second round. It was surprising. He was a surprise draft day drop. And the reason came out later was that a heart condition was discovered and not leaked teams, but like teams were notified, obviously, and it wasn't let out to the public at all. So everyone was like, "Why is he falling?" And a lot of people thought it was his size, but it was that a heart condition was discovered. But it turned, that same thing happened with Montez Sweat 2 years ago now, where he was expected to go top 10, and he ended up falling all the way to the end of the first round when Washington picked him up. But with JOK, he was one of the best linebackers I've ever seen in college. The versatility he had, being able to cover anybody, essentially play a safety corner at linebacker and tackle all the strongest running backs still and make all these plays. But heck yeah.
Wait,
But
hold on. Jorge keeps his house at 65 degrees. Is that in the summertime too? Like,
amen.
What is your electric bill like? No.
All of it. Who cares?
No, take clothes off. And Jorge, I don't think we have a Dynasty Rewind flannel yet. But
we should.
If you ever have any questions about what Viridian Global has, we do have the Dynasty Rewind collection over there. Just DM Will Harris at It's Harris Time. He loves DMs like that. Just like Bob loves JOK enough to put him at number 4. Keep going.
Yep, absolutely. So, like I said, he was an elite playmaker in college. One of the arguably the best playmakers in this draft class. Only reason he wasn't higher, the draft capital is a concern, and it's also a crowded linebacker room. And when I say crowded, it's because it's crowded with Jags, just guys. Anthony Walker was actually a big signing for them this year. Former linebacker out of the Indianapolis Colts.
I like Anthony Walker a lot.
I do too.
Even with
he was
Darius Leonard there.
Yep, he was. Well, and the one knock on him was he was actually getting phased out throughout the year by Bobby Okereke, and Bobby Okereke ended up getting hurt, and then Anthony Walker got his role back basically. But the Colts elected not to re-sign Anthony Walker, so look up a sleeper, Bobby Okereke, for some people. He might be available in your leagues. But Anthony Walker actually coming over to Cleveland in practices with JOK has actually comped him pretty much 1-to-1 with Darius Leonard already as a rookie. And, the thing with Darius Leonard is, he was quote unquote out of nowhere. Nobody was expecting him. But I went back and actually looked at his college production, and he was an elite college producer, better than almost anybody you can think of out of college. Granted, he was at a no-name school, but I don't want a Snuggie. Please, no. But JOK, he's, like I said, he's a solid player. I think he takes a role in that offense sooner rather than later. I think it's going to be him and Anthony Walker rocking it out at the linebacker. Walker will play a micro role. He'll still have a very valuable role, but JOK will probably take weak side and end up playing a lot of like kind of box safety, kind of like a roaming coverage guy. But mostly weak side linebacker, I think, is where he'll fit in. And if he does end up in some sort of a safety role, I mean, he's wearing number 28. Not that it matters anymore, because anybody can just be any freaking number now.
Mac Jones is 50.
Well, for now, I don't.
That's going to change, right?
It will, yeah. That's something the Patriots always do. All the rookies wear number 50 plus until they earn it. But yeah, so JOK, I like him to take over early. I don't know if it's going to be week 1. I would assume it is. It's decent enough draft capital that he should take over right away. Speaking of another guy who's going to take over right away, probably take over the role of your boy Cole Holcomb. We got to talk about Jamin Davis.
Don't. Why you got to do this to me? Is this your number? Is this your number 3 right here?
Number 3, yeah. So
what's his name again?
Jamin Davis, Jamin Davis. Moving on with him real quick. I wasn't huge on him for college. Reason being is he had really good college production. He had great points per game and IDP 1-2-3 scoring. As a starter, my biggest knock is that he was only a 1-year starter. And what I've noticed diving into college producers who then go on to the NFL as 1-year starters, they don't do well. If anything, they do well early and then kind of fizzle out because they don't have the proper transition from college to the NFL. They don't have the correct pro transition. And he was comped to Darius Leonard by, I want to say, Daniel Jeremiah. I want to say, it could be wrong. I know he comped somebody to Darius Leonard recently, and he ended up being a bust. The last guy that got comped to Darius Leonard was Jermaine Pratt. Do you know who Jermaine Pratt is? Yeah,
I know who Chris
exactly. Oh, yeah, not quite. But the thing about it, and again, it's that whole first-year starter. He had decent draft capital, but he's amounted to nothing. He's a linebacker in the Bengals for reference.
Could we say
go ahead.
Defensive talent needs more time in college to grow?
That's something I've noticed, is that like the players who have more development in college, especially on like good programs, the LSUs, the Clemson's, the bigger name schools, or at least even 4-year starters on whatever college team, at the end of the day usually do pretty well. But when they're a first-year starter, they just don't have the reps. And then my biggest knock with why he was only a first-year starter, it wasn't like he transferred into the program. He's out of Kentucky, so which is in the SEC. Okay, fine. But can you name a linebacker in the last 10 years that came out of Kentucky?
Josh Allen.
Not okay. Off-ball linebacker. Sorry.
He's a linebacker.
He's an outside linebacker and he plays D line.
You said linebacker.
I know. I thought of the same thing when I'm also, Josh Allen.
I am a huge fan of that. I'm a huge fan of both Josh Allens. But aside from that, not off the top of my head. You might be able to, but I can't.
I can't, and I haven't gone and looked. But again, it's like, okay, so who is he fighting for 2 years at Kentucky that he couldn't seize a role? Nobody. And then he goes, finally his 3rd year. I don't know if the guy graduated, what happened, whatever, but he goes off. And then my big knock again that I have, and this is something I have in the pros, is that when a linebacker, any position really, except for the defensive line, so any DB or any linebacker, if they have less solo tackles than assisted tackles, that's a red flag for me.
Okay. And
reason being is that if you can make a solo tackle, either A, you can tackle players on your own, you're strong enough, big enough, fast enough, And then B, you're either recognizing the play faster than everybody else on your team, and you're getting there faster than everybody else on your team, and then you can also make the tackle. But if you're doing a lot of assisted tackles, that means you're either unable to tackle players on your own, or B, you're just getting there late and you're getting like a pity tackle tacked on to whatever you're doing. You're that like fifth guy to get there to bring a guy down, whatever the case is. So that's, like I said, my knocks on him. But again,
I would like to say
go ahead.
that Nate Gary has 101 solo tackles and 62 assisted tackles.
Doesn't mean he's good.
He's terrible.
The reverse doesn't mean they're good. Yeah.
No, what I'm saying is he should have more solo tackles. He's terrible. And I'm back on the bandwagon of hating Nate Gary.
Glad I could help.
Yeah, that's good. Sorry.
But yeah, no, you're good. But again, like I said, the first round draft capital, he's going to start year one. I think Holcomb still plays, and I think he'll even probably be the quote unquote Mike. I think he'll have a green dot. He'll be calling plays. He showed well in that role. So I think he'll still be valuable, but I think Jamin Davis is going to steal, which honestly is probably going to make Cole Holcomb that much more of a value. Because I think he'll still be able to perform. And I'm really curious to see what Jamin Davis does on this defense. I was hoping they would draft JOK, because imagining them with JOK on that defense, the carnage he could cause with the blitzers in front of him, that whole line of first rounders, and then you put a linebacker back there that can do anything. And then, Jamin Davis just never profiled well elsewhere. He just kind of loaded up a lot of tackles and some tackles for loss and stuff like that. So that is my spiel on Jamin Davis.
You were talking about someone stealing reps. Do you like stealing money, Bob?
I do.
Because that's basically what it's like when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy. What's the worst thing in fantasy football? Seeing a player you didn't start go off on your bench and costing you a win easily takes the cake. I just want to apologize for this read through. The guy that wrote it is sitting right next to me. Now there's a new way to play where your best players always start and your duds stay on the bench where they belong. Best ball Eve.
Best ball leave.
Underdog Fantasy has you covered. Underdog Fantasy is the new best ball platform where you can turn your knowledge and competitive edge into winnings. Draft once, sit back and enjoy the ride, as your optimal lineup will automatically start each week. No waivers, no trades, just drafts. Sign up today using the code REWIND, all caps, so when you make a deposit, you'll receive a $25 kickback to play. Not ready for fantasy football? That's okay. They also have drafts and daily pick'ems right now featuring the MLB, NBA, and NHL. So join Underdog Fantasy today using promo code REWIND. The link is in the description, and it better be, Bob.
It will be. It is.
Yeah, and I will say I'm really glad that they are in Pennsylvania now because the draft or the app is awesome. So
yep,
I love it.
Yep, I've been on there a ton. There'll actually be a video coming out of that tomorrow from when this is posted on YouTube. So be sure to get over there. I've done a ton of drafts already, but pretty much looking at cranking out one of those a week. I'm having a blast. It's an easy format to draft on. And the interface is awesome. It's very aesthetically pleasing, very pleasing to the eye. But yeah, get over there, draft with me, come take my money, take other people's money. It's awesome, dude. Get over there.
Yeah. And we got a really cool couple of mock drafts coming up for you guys. I don't want to spoil it. Unfortunately, you're going to be seeing a lot more of this guy. That's all I'll say. Bob, number 2, go for it.
Number 2, oddly enough, was just in the news recently, not positive. My number 2 is Zaven Collins, who was just arrested for reckless driving. I don't think, if anything, it ends up costing him. It might cost him a couple games, I think, if anything. But the NFL is getting more and more lax with things like this. The only things they're really not allowing are, felony types. Well, this was a felony, oddly enough, but, stuff like domestic violence, which they basically have a no tolerance policy on that. But I don't think this affects him super long-term or anything like that. I don't think he's going to miss a ton of time. But moving on, Zaven Collins, he was first-round draft capital. He's going to start right away. They've already said he's the starting Mike linebacker. Which if you followed me at all in the pre-draft process, I hated him at Mike linebacker. Reason being, I didn't think he was great at diagnosing coverages and stuff like that. I thought he was kind of jumpy. I will say when he when he saw the gap or when he saw it and it clicked right away, he was very efficient at getting to the ball. He never had issues getting caught in traffic. But on the plays where he doesn't see it right away or it doesn't jive right away, very, very problematic in terms of him reacting to the play. However, I loved his outside linebacker stuff where he was playing starting on the line of scrimmage where he either dropped back into the flat coverage, he'd pick up the running back in the flat, whatever, or if he was playing the run, or if he was rushing the passer. I loved his edge rush or his outside linebacker stuff. And seeing him at his size, that would have been, he's a 253-pound linebacker. And I think that would have been a perfect role for him to be able to sit on the side, and they would have been able to keep Jordan. They could have still drafted him there and just put him out there and kept Jordan Hicks. They would have had more of a pass rush presence. They would have been able to get in the flat, so on and so forth. But it's interesting to me that they double tap back-to-back years at the linebacker position. They drafted Isaiah Simmons last year. I think this will hurt his value, and I think the reason being is that Isaiah Simmons is going to be used a lot in coverage, I think, especially shutting down tight ends and stuff like that. I think that's going to be basically like, hey, any slot guy, any tight end, take him out of the game. And the problem with that is when you're good at coverage, the ball doesn't get thrown your way. You're already, usually trailing away with that wide receiver when the runner gets that way. So you're just not in a great position to make the play. I think there's a chance he still does well, but I am concerned for him. I've traded away a couple shares. I still have several, but I've kind of hedged my bets. I have some Zaven Collins. I have some Isaiah Simmons. I had them both on the same team, and I shipped off Zaven Collins. I had them both on the same team, and I shipped off Isaiah Simmons. So I'm absolutely hedging my bets on those two, just because, like I said, I still think Isaiah Simmons is a great player, and that's part of the problem of why I think he might lose value is because the good linebackers that cover well, especially in that mid-intermediate range, really don't thrive in fantasy. And this is why Nate Gary did so well in fantasies, because he was terrible in coverage. Basically was just good enough to stay close enough to the guy that they wouldn't, get all the way down the field.
What about when he was turned around facing the other way?
That's different. But just bad enough to let the play happen and just good enough to make the tackle. So I am intrigued to see how that situation shakes out. Like I said, I didn't like Zaven Collins pre-draft. He was like my LB6, I think, LB5 or 6. So I hated Zaven Collins pre-draft, and that was just as a prospect. And the situation he ended up with, I don't love him at Mike linebacker, but he's going to get reps. And basically, he's going to take a lot of the run stopping work. I don't love him in coverage. He's a big body. I don't think he's that fast. A lot of people think he has end-line to end-line speed. I don't see that. I didn't see that on film. If you did think he was fast running on the field, just compare him to who he was running against. That's all I have to say about that. But he was a 3-year starter. I think he's a good enough player that he can do well. I think the development is going to be key for him in how he starts to recognize plays and stuff like that. But he's a great build. He's a bigger dude, so he's going to be an enforcer on that defense. But that is it for Zaven Collins, unless you had any questions.
Can I put your number one player up right now?
Yeah, go ahead, man. I know you're gonna love it. So my number one IDP rookie is Micah Parsons, and he was my number one heading into the draft. He's the number one still standing as we leave the draft process. Micah Parsons, to me, his big knock in college was he had a lot of character concerns, but whatever. The NFL doesn't care, especially in college, until those come out later and they get real big in the news and people come forward. Then they don't care. Then they'll care. But for now, he's a great prospect who there was a lot of concern on how he would perform at the combine after taking a year off, or opting out a year, I should say. And he blew the combine away. I mean, he had better numbers, better stats in the combine, quote unquote, the pro days than Devin White, Devin Bush, who were the last linebackers to really light up the combine. He had a sub 4.4 40, blew away every other metric, so on and so forth. Physically, his big knock in college was coverage, that they are. But which is why it's a very fitting pick for them. in more ways than one. And what they did was last year, they picked the best player available that they didn't need, but made their offense darn near unstoppable. And then this year they do the same thing with the defense. They draft a player they don't really need, but he was more than likely the best player on the board. Go
Don't
ahead.
worry, Mike McCarthy makes anything stoppable.
I know.
You know.
I get it. But with Michael Parsons, like I said, his big knock in college was coverage. I didn't see a lot of issues in his coverage. That's just not his thing either. Like, he's built to rush the passer from the linebacker position, and he's built to make plays on the ball and tackle the ball carrier. That's what he's built to do. He's a heat-seeking missile, basically. When he sees ball carry, he sees ball, he goes get ball. A lot of people were comping him to like Luke Kuechly coming out. I hated that comp. I don't think anybody right now really deserves a Luke Kuechly comp. In this draft class, at least, maybe coming forward, there might be one, but I didn't see it in this class. I copped into more of a Tremaine Edmonds, who plays for the Buffalo Bills now. He's a super young player, but he hasn't, stepped up in the pros yet. But in college, he was just an absolute animal. Same type of player who make plays behind the line of scrimmage, make plays on the pass rushing. He'd make plays on the quarterback, so on and so forth. He was that same type of player who would basically hover around the line of scrimmage and just make plays any way he could. And then Michael Parsons was that way a lot in college too. His best film that I saw was when he stays within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage and just kind of sifts things out and lets it happen. If it's a run play, come at me. If it's a quarterback play or a run, whatever the case is, or if things open up where he can blitz, he's on it. And he's, like I said, he's a missile when he's after the ball. But the one big knock and with that whole defense now is that it's so crowded, and it's actually crowded. It's not Cleveland Browns crowded. It's Dallas Cowboys, Jalen Smith, Keanu Neal, who's allegedly playing linebacker now, and Leighton Vander Esch, who's currently a linebacker there as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he really plays into things. I know there's a lot of flack on Jalen Smith for his coverage ability. So even though I don't see it, I don't think that's a real thing. I think that's just something that Cowboys fans started saying and got blown out of proportion, and everybody started saying it. But I do think there is legitimate concern with Leighton Vander Esch. Hasn't been able to stay healthy the last 2 years. Coming into, I think, if this isn't his contract year, the next season is. And he had neck issues and concussion issues in college, and that started to kind of continue into the pros. So I think there's a real chance that he doesn't make it out of his first contract with the Cowboys. So I think that's where Michael Parsons is more than likely going to get his work. And the one thing with him is he's said that he's an all-around athlete, but at his heart, he's a pass rusher. And that's what he was in high school. He was a defensive end, signed up, committed to Penn State to play defensive end. And they're like, you know what? Nah, you're going to play linebacker. Why? I don't know, but he's done pretty well for himself. He was a highly drafted first-round pick. So I mean, I'm pretty happy to buy in on Michael Parsons. Not that I have in any of my leagues, just because I haven't been able to get him. But he's my number one. I'm sticking with him. I loved him as a prospect. I like the landing spot for the most part. The thing with the Cowboys is they use their shiny new toys. They don't, with CeeDee Lamb, you didn't see anybody sitting him week one. He's like, get him out there. We drafted him early for a reason, not to sit the guy. And I think Parsons will be the same way. I know you're a huge Parsons fan. You got to watch him in college. You're a Penn State fan. So you can dive in on this guy a little bit, I think.
Well, I would, but really, honestly, Bob, I didn't get to watch him as much as I wanted to. It's one of those things where when you're married with a little kid, you choose, do you want to watch football all day Saturday or do you want to watch football all day Sunday? You can't do both. So
Amen.
pretty much everything I got to see was highlights or late games. Unfortunately, Penn State hasn't won a lot of late games lately, especially against Ohio State. I do have a question for you, though.
Sure.
What is your college team? It's the Golden Gophers, right?
No, Badgers, Wisconsin Badgers.
Okay. I was checking. I know what it was.
Okay, good.
Bob, I think that's going to wrap it up for our top 10 IDP post-draft players. Thank you for hanging out with me, talking some linemen, linebackers, defensive backs. Sorry, I'm just a little gassed today. It's been a long day. So Bob, before we head out, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at BobVan_IDP on the Twitter. Do a lot of work on the Dynasty Rewind YouTube channel. If you're listening to this via podcast, get over to the YouTube channel. We're pumping up content pretty much daily at this rate. Best ball drafts, mock drafts, one-on-one series with some of the best in the industry. We're doing a lot over there. We're making a big push on the YouTube. So that's a great place to find me. And then also I do a lot of my writing work over at Fantasy Six Pack too. FantasySixPack.net. Pretty easy to find my stuff. Anything IDP I do over there. So, and then obviously the Dynasty Rewind Patreon, patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in there. I know Mike just teased the stickers earlier, but there's a lot more to be had. There's rankings, IDP rankings, stickers, bonus podcast, bonus written content. You can have all that for $5. Otherwise, if you just want to hang out with us more, you can get into our elite community group chat for just $1 a month. Nothing too crazy. But if you want all that other stuff, just $5 a month. So.
And you could pledge more too, just so you know, that's fine. If you are so inclined, you could follow me on Twitter at RewindCEO. I would much rather you follow the show at Dynasty Rewind. Head on over to that YouTube. We're at 313 subscribers. We would love to add and see you be a part of that. You know about the Patreon. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. So until next time, everybody, be kind, please rewind. Thank you for watching, and always thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Dynasty Rewind. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. And as always, be kind, please rewind.